The Eternal Spring of Mr. Ito, Chapter 13. The cave was hidden from below by the jut of the ledge. On either side of its rainbow-shaped entrance, two big rocks stood like sentries. Sara stared at them. They didn't belong here on the sandy cliff face. Someone had worked hard to haul them up from below. She crept carefully along the narrow ledge toward them, trying to ignore the sea below, now licking at the base of the cliff. The wind, so gentle down on the beach, was blowing hard on this side of the point. It whipped her hair into her eyes and mouth and tugged at her dress. Using her fingers like claws, she clung to the cliff face and edged toward Fearless. He was standing perfectly still, his nose snuffing the air in the cave for a clue to what was inside. She peered past him into the darkness, but could see nothing. She put her arm around his solid, warm body and felt it tremble. But he wasn't afraid. He stood steady as a rock, his tail high. Holding on to Fearless, Sara dared to glance down. Now the waves were beating at the bottom of the cliff in a steady rhythm. Over to the left, a little way out, a big rock protruded from the water. Around its base, the sea swirled this way and that, crashing against it incessantly. Suddenly, Sara realized where she was. The rock out in the water must be one of the Indians called Homilsum, which marked the boundary between the Squamish and Fraser River tribes. No wonder the wind was so strong here. Miss Ferguson had said the Indians called Point Grey the battleground of the west wind. And the big rock, Homilsum, had once been some kind of minor god, the Tyee of the west wind, who did bad things like sinking canoes and tearing down the trees, until he made the mistake of challenging the Sagali Tyee himself. When that happened, the Sagali Tyee turned him into a rock round which the west wind would constantly blow. Sara grinned and hugged Fearless. I'll bet nobody else in the whole school has ever seen Homilsum. That's worth getting stuck up here for. The sand blew off the cliff face, stinging her eyes. Come on, Fearless, let's get out of the wind. She turned back to the cave. Maybe we'll find something Indian to take back to Miss Ferguson. Inside, they stood for a moment to let their eyes adjust to the darkness. Then Sara looked around. The back of the cave was hidden in shadow. Here, in the middle of the ceiling arched very close over her head. At the side of the cave, she'd have to stoop to avoid banging her forehead. It was very still away from the pull of the wind, which sighed and moaned through the grasses out on the ledge. Something gleamed at her feet, and she bent to pick it up. It was a black stone, polished smooth by the action of the sea. Excitement filled her. It didn't belong in the cave, any more than the boulders by the opening. Some young brave must have brought the stone up years ago, maybe for barter, or for a present to his bride, maybe to decorate his clothing, or for some religious ceremony. The stone lay flat and cold and curiously heavy in the palm of her hand. She bent to look for another, then stopped. There were a lot of the smooth black stones. They lay in a large and perfect circle on the floor of the cave, forming the boundary of what looked like a miniature sea. except that the waves of this sea were made of silver sand, carefully brushed into swirling patterns in such perfect imitation of the water around Homelsum that she could almost hear them boom against the rock. Carefully, she set the stone back in place between its brothers so the sea would not spill out beyond its borders, and stepped back, glad she hadn't destroyed this work of art by clumsily walking into it. Her arms and legs ached from the climb up the cliff. She made for the shadows against the back wall and sat down. Pulling Fearless against her, she gazed out at the sky. It was getting dark, and Aunt Jean would be wondering where she was, worried, maybe calling the Lloyds. But there was nothing she could do. She and Fearless would be stuck here at least another couple of hours, unless she tried climbing the rest of the way up the cliff. But that would be dangerous in the gathering darkness. And if by any chance they managed to get all the way up without falling, they'd be lost in the thick pine woods at the top. Ernie had told her there were wild animals in those woods, bears, wolves. She was safer in the cave. But she couldn't help shivering, and she pulled Fearless closer. She was dozing when she felt a low growl rumble through Fearless. She snapped her eyes open, her skin prickling. Moonlight filled the cave. Fearless had jumped to his feet and stood, stiff-legged, in front of her. "What is it, Fearless?" she whispered. "What is it, old boy?" He ignored her, concentrating on the cave opening. Sara shrank back as far as she could into the shadows. Now she could hear what had alerted him, a soft scraping noise. Someone or something was climbing the cliff. She wanted to shut her eyes and not see what was coming, but this wasn't a scary movie. This was real. She waited, hardly breathing. A dark figure blocked the cave entrance. It stood silhouetted against the fading light like some sea creature, water dripping from its long hair and beard. Then, with a dragging step, it advanced into the cave and collapsed against the side wall. Raspy breathing echoed painfully in the cavern. Sara kept perfectly still, hoping it would go away without discovering her, but Fearless broke free and ran across the cave. The limp figure against the wall made a startling motion. "Wah!" Then, "You are sign promised by Cave Kami?"